1 hour interesting Reddit stories to fall asleep. Story 1. I thought it was a date. I was wrong. It all started on a regular afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. I was standing in line, contemplating whether to get an espresso or a caramel macchiato, when I noticed a woman in front of me drop her wallet. She seemed busy scrolling through her phone and didn't realize it had slipped from her bag. Without hesitation, I picked it up and tapped her shoulder. She turned around, surprised at first, but then smiled when I handed her the wallet. "Wow, thanks. I didn't even notice," she said, laughing nervously. We struck up a conversation right then and there. Her name was Sarah. She had just moved to the city for work and was looking for good places to eat and explore. We sat down at a nearby table, sipping our drinks and talking about everything: movies, travel, our favorite books. There was an instant connection, or at least I thought there was. A few days passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Just when I had given up on hearing from her again, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Hey, want to grab dinner this Friday? I know a great spot." My heart raced. Was this a date? The way we had connected at the coffee shop felt special, and now she was asking me to dinner? I wasn't about to question my luck. I quickly typed back, "That sounds great. Looking forward to it." Excitement took over me the whole day leading up to our dinner. I wanted to make a good impression, so I put extra effort into choosing the right outfit, something casual but stylish. I rehearsed potential topics in my head, and even looked up the restaurant's menu online to seem decisive when ordering. This was going to be the perfect first date, or so I thought. The restaurant was a cozy little place with a romantic ambience. Dim lighting, candlelit tables, and soft jazz playing in the background. When I arrived, Sarah was already seated, waving at me excitedly. Her warm smile only fueled my belief that this was indeed a date. As I walked toward the table, I noticed something odd. There were two other people sitting with her, an older gentleman and a younger woman. My mind raced. Who were they? Why were they here? Did I misunderstand something? The moment I sat down, Sarah introduced me enthusiastically. "This is Mike, my mentor, and his assistant Rachel," she said with a grin. My stomach dropped. This was not a date. It was a business dinner. Sarah barely looked at me as she pulled out a notebook and started discussing business plans with Mike. They talked about projections, marketing strategies, and investment opportunities. I sat there dumbfounded. I had no idea this dinner was meant to be about work. I tried to keep up with the conversation, nodding occasionally and pretending to understand what they were talking about. But deep inside, I felt completely lost. I wanted to say something to clarify things, but I didn't want to embarrass myself. Suddenly, Rachel turned to me. "So, how do you feel about proposal?" she asked. I froze. What proposal? My brain scrambled for an answer. It sounds interesting," I replied, hoping it was vague enough to fit anything. Sarah shot me a confused look. That's when it hit me. Sarah had never intended this to be a date. She had invited me because she thought I was interested in business. She must have assumed I was here to contribute to the discussion. Desperate not to look completely clueless, I decided to wing it. You know, leveraging core competencies is key in a competitive market. I said randomly. Mike nodded approvingly. Maybe I wasn't doomed after all. Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Wait, have you even read Proposal?" she asked. My heart pounded. Not yet, but I'd love to," I said enthusiastically. She raised an eyebrow, realizing something was off. Trying to change the subject, I asked, "So, what's your favorite movie?" The entire table fell silent. Mike cleared his throat. "We were talking about financial modeling," he said dryly. I wanted to disappear. The rest of the night was torture. Every time I tried to contribute, it became painfully clear I had no idea what I was talking about. Sarah, who had been so warm at the start, barely acknowledged me now. I couldn't take it anymore. I discreetly texted my friend under the table, "Call me with an emergency now." 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I answered dramatically. "What?" "Oh no, I'll be right there." I stood up, forcing an apologetic expression. "Sorry guys, family emergency." Then I bolted out of the restaurant. Sitting in my car, I replayed everything. How did I misread this so badly? My excitement had completely blinded me. The date I had imagined never existed. Feeling guilty, I texted Sarah, "Hey, sorry about tonight. I think I misunderstood the invite. Hope the meeting went well." She replied, "Yeah, no worries. Maybe next time. Let me know if you're not interested in business stuff." That night, I learned an important lesson. Never assume. Just because someone asks you to dinner doesn't mean it's a date. I laughed about it with my friends. One of them joked, "At least you learned some business terms." A week later, I saw Sarah at a coffee shop again. I waved. She nodded back. No awkwardness, just two people moving on. Inspired by my accidental exposure to business, I started reading about entrepreneurship. Maybe this mistake wasn't so bad. A month later, I met Jessica. This time, I clarified up front. "So, is this a date?" She laughed. "Yes, it's a date." Lesson learned. Encouraged by friends, I posted my experience on Reddit. To my surprise, the story gained traction, with thousands of people commenting on how relatable it was. A few days later, a YouTube storyteller reached out, asking if they could feature my post. I agreed, and soon, my story was reaching millions. Sarah messaged me, "Dude, I just saw your story on YouTube. That was hilarious. Didn't know you were such a storyteller." Despite the awkward experience, Sarah and I remained friends. We laughed about it and moved on. Sarah jokingly suggested, "Since you pretended to be a businessman, why not actually start a business?" That idea stuck with me. I decided to create content around storytelling, sharing real-life awkward moments and lessons learned. That one misunderstanding led to an unexpected new venture, proving that mistakes can lead to success. If there's one thing I learned, it's the importance of clear communication. Assumptions can lead to hilarious or embarrassing situations. Chapter 30, moving forward. Looking back, I don't regret that night. What started as a mistake turned into an opportunity one never saw coming. Story 2, my girlfriend's ultimate betrayal. How I found out she was cheating with 4 guys. For 3 years, I thought I was in the perfect relationship. Anna and I met in college, and from day one, we clicked. We traveled together, spent nights talking about our dreams, and even discussed moving in together after graduation. I trusted her completely, until everything fell apart. It started with small things. Anna became more distant, glued to her phone, laughing at messages she never shared. When I asked, she'd brush it off, say it was just a friend from work. But something in her voice made me uneasy. Then came the late-night calls. She would step out of the room to take them, lowering her voice. Whenever I asked who it was, she'd get defensive. It's just Lisa. You know how she is. But I knew Lisa well. Lisa never called past 10 p.m. Anna started making last-minute plans without me. Work, dinner, helping a friend move, too tired for date night. It was as if she was slowly phasing me out of her life. But I didn't want to believe it. One evening, she left her laptop open on our couch. I wasn't typed to snoop, but when a message popped up that read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." I felt my stomach drop. The sender? A name I didn't recognize. Mark. That night, I confronted her. "Who's Mark?" Her face turned pale. "Just a co-worker," she stammered. "He was thanking me for helping him with a project." But the message didn't sound like a work-related thank you. I didn't have solid proof, but I started paying closer attention. I noticed she never left her phone unattended, started locking her laptop, and became more irritable whenever I asked about her day. One night, while using her iPad, which was linked to her iMessages, another message popped up, this time from a different guy, Jason. "Wish I could hold you again tonight." My hand shook as I scrolled up and found weeks of messages, flirty, intimate, undeniable. My heart pounded. It wasn't just Mark, it was Jason too. But something told me it didn't stop there. I had to find out the truth. I started checking patterns. I noticed she had frequent business trips that lined up with weekends I was out of town. I checked our shared Uber account, multiple late-night rides to unfamiliar addresses. Then came the final clue. A friend of mine, Mia, sent me a screenshot from Snapchat. "Isn't this Anna?" It was a photo of Anna at a bar, sitting a little too close to another guy, holding his hand. Not Mark, not Jason. Someone new. With a sinking feeling, I decided to dig deeper. I tried logging into her old Facebook, the one she claimed she barely used. A forgotten password reset email was still accessible on our shared account. That's when I found it. Hidden messages, flirtations, secrets. Scrolling through her messages, I found another name, Eric. My breath caught in my throat. For guys. 4. Each of them with messages confirming what I already feared. She wasn't just cheating. She was living multiple lives. Everything made sense. The secrecy, the mood swings, the over-the-top guilt gifts. I had been played. But I wasn't going to let it go unchallenged. I decided to gather undeniable proof. Screenshots, timestamps, ride history, everything. I needed to confront her with evidence so concrete she couldn't deny it. I sat her down, placed my phone on the table, and played a voice note I had taken from her last conversation with Mark. "I can't wait to see you when he's not around." She turned ghost white. At first, she denied everything. "You're being paranoid," she shouted. But when I listed all 4 names and showed the proof, she crumbled. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she sobbed. I don't know how it got so bad." She tried to explain. "I loved you, but I needed something else." She rambled about feeling trapped, about excitement, about how she thought she could balance everything. I sat in silence, letting her words wash over me. I stood up. "I don't care why you did it. I just know I deserve better." Her tears meant nothing. I walked out. The days after were a blur. I moved out of our apartment, blocked her everywhere, and tried to rebuild myself. The betrayal left a scar, but I refused to let it define me. One night, I found myself standing outside the restaurant where Anna and I had shared our first date. The memories flooded back, but this time, they didn't hurt. They felt like echoes of a past life. I realized I had never truly allowed myself to feel everything. I had pushed the pain down, masked it with distractions. But that night, I let myself feel. And it didn't break me. Unexpectedly, I received a message from Eric. She tried to reach out to me. I shut her down. "Hope you're doing okay." It was strange, but I felt lighter. The past no longer had a grip on me. Of all the people I never want to see again, Mark was near the top of the list. But when I ran into him at the gym, he surprised me. "Hey man, no hard feelings?" I hesitated, then extended a hand. None. We were all played. I never expected to find a strange sort of camaraderie with the other guys. We had all been deceived, but somehow we had become stronger because of it. Betrayal had connected us in a way we never anticipated. I finally stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering where she was, what she was doing. She was just another chapter in my story, one that no longer needed my attention. Love should never be about suspicion, about looking over your shoulder. I promised myself I would never settle for anything less than honesty again. One day I met someone new, and for the first time, I wasn't scared. I wasn't bitter. I was just ready. Months later, I got a final message from Anna. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without replying. Some doors are meant to stay closed. With a deep breath, I stepped into my future. Stronger, wiser, free. Story 3. The time a gaming buddy accidentally came out of the closet to us. For years, our gaming squad had been inseparable. We met online through a random matchmaking game and somehow formed an unbreakable bond. It was me, Jake, Chris, Sam, and a guy who went by the username Shadow Knight, real name Adam. We spent countless hours playing together, cracking jokes, and sharing bits of our lives, even though none of us had met in person. It was a regular Friday night. We hopped into a new RPG game and set out on another adventure, laughing at Sam's terrible aim and Chris's endless smack talk. Adam had been quiet for most of the session, but we didn't think much of it. He was probably just focused. In the middle of an intense battle, Adam's mic cut out. His character stopped moving. Did Shadow lag out? Chris asked. We waited, but he didn't return. A few minutes later, he rejoined the voice chat, sounding different, nervous, shaken. Sorry about that, guys, Adam mumbled. Had to deal with something. We brushed it off and kept playing, but something felt off. He wasn't as engaged as usual, responding in short sentences, barely laughing at our usual jokes. An hour later, we finally cleared the mission, and Chris started his usual post-match rant. Out of nowhere, Adam sighed heavily and muttered, "Man, I just wish it was easier to tell people things." Like what? I asked, not thinking much of it. He hesitated. Never mind. Forget it. Of course. That only made us more curious. Nah, dude, what's up? Sam pushed. We're your squad, man. You can talk to us. Adam stayed silent for a long time before letting out a nervous chuckle. Okay, well, I think I just accidentally came out to my family. We were stunned. The voice chat went dead silent. After a long pause, Chris blurted out, "Wait, what?" Adam laughed nervously. Yeah, so that happened. Sam was the first to speak. Dude, that's huge. Are you okay? I don't know, Adam admitted. I wasn't planning on telling them yet. It just kind of slipped out, and now I have no idea how to handle it. He told us what happened. His younger sister had been talking about a guy she liked, and their mom made an offhand comment like, "One day, Adam will bring home a nice girl too." Without thinking, he had responded, "Or a guy." Silence. Then his mom had just blinked at him. His dad had shifted uncomfortably. His sister had gasped. And before he could even process what he said, his family was staring at him in complete shock. I panicked and left the room, Adam continued. Came back to my PC like nothing happened, but I could hear my parents talking about it in the other room. We didn't know what to say. Not because we cared that Adam was gay, it didn't change anything, but because we didn't know how to help. Dude, I finally said, "First off, that's huge. Second, how you feel about it?" Adam let out a shaky breath. I don't know. Relieved? Terrified? A little bit of both? It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Chris, never one to handle emotions well, finally spoke. Bro, you know what this means? You're officially the first one of us to have balls big enough to admit something huge on voice chat. Respect. That got a laugh out of Adam. Thanks, man. We reassured him that it didn't change anything. You're still our boy, Sam said. Still Shadow Knight, the guy who carries us through boss fights. We got you. Adam's biggest fear was what his parents would say. He checked his phone nervously and saw a text from his mom. We need to talk. His stomach dropped. Adam muted his mic and went to face them. We waited anxiously, barely playing. Minutes turned into an hour. When Adam finally came back, he sighed. That was intense. What happened? I asked. They were shocked. My dad didn't say much, just nodded. My mom asked a lot of questions. It wasn't bad, just overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, Adam told us how his parents were trying to understand. His mom asked awkward but well-meaning questions. His dad mostly stayed silent, but at least he wasn't angry. His sister, on the other hand, had hugged him immediately. I always knew, she had said. I was just waiting for you to say it. A month later, we held an in-game coming-out party for Adam. We found a ridiculous rainbow-colored outfit for his character and took a hilarious group screenshot. Adam started opening up about his fears, including how some distant relatives might react. We reassured him that the people who mattered most already supported him. Slowly, Adam told more of his friends outside the squad. Some were surprised but supportive. Others barely reacted at all, treating it like no big deal, which relieved him. He noticed how much easier it was to talk to us than people in his everyday life. The squad had become his safe space, and he realized he wanted that same comfort outside gaming too. Through this experience, Adam became closer to us than ever before. He told us he never thought he'd be able to talk about his personal life this openly. After months of slowly becoming more comfortable in his identity, Adam decided to attend his first Pride event. He was nervous, unsure what to expect, but his sister insisted on going with him. She even bought him a rainbow wristband. "You're going to love it," she assured him. By the end of the event, Adam felt something he hadn't in a long time. Belonging. One evening, Adam hesitated before dropping a message in our group chat. "Guys, I think I have a date." The chat exploded with excitement. Sam immediately asked for details. Adam had met someone through a friend, a guy named Tyler. He was both thrilled and terrified at the idea of dating. Adam had barely been out for a year, but that didn't stop the squad from acting like overprotective siblings. When he told us about Tyler, Chris demanded a full background check, jokingly, of course. "If he hurts you, we riot," Sam added. Adam just laughed, but deep down, he was touched by our concern. After years of gaming together, we finally planned a real-life meetup. The idea started as a joke, but before we knew it, flights were booked and plans were made. Meeting Adam in person was surreal. He was the same guy we had known for years, but this time, there were no screens separating us. During our meetup, we decided to do something crazy, rent a gaming cafe and play together in the same room. The chemistry was exactly the same as online. Chris still talked too much, Sam still had awful aim, and Adam, he carried us like always. Though Adam's parents had gradually accepted him, not everyone was as understanding. A distant cousin made a rude comment at a family gathering. Adam, for the first time, stood his ground. "I don't need your approval," he said firmly. It was a moment of quiet triumph. Despite the support from friends and family, Adam sometimes struggled with self-doubt. What if I'm never fully accepted? He admitted one night while gaming. We reminded him of how far he had come. You don't need everyone's acceptance, just the right people's. I told him. Adam's dad had been the most distant about his coming out. But one evening out of the blue, he sat Adam down and asked, "How's Tyler?" It wasn't much, but it was a start. It's his way of showing he cares. Adam's sister later said. As Adam grew more comfortable in his identity, he began supporting others. He helped a younger cousin navigate similar feelings. "You don't have to figure it all out at once," he told them. The squad was proud of him. What once seemed impossible became Adam's reality. Being out, being himself, and being happy. He no longer flinched at the idea of introducing Tyler as his boyfriend. He was just Adam. Adam introduced Tyler to the squad, and to our surprise, he was actually good at our games. "Okay, I like him," Chris declared. "But if he ever beats me in a 1v1, I'll reconsider." One day, Chris casually admitted, I used to think I'd be weird about this stuff, but turns out I just needed to know someone to understand." It was a small but powerful moment. Proof that people could change. Our friendship had started over a game, but it had grown into something much bigger. Adam wasn't just our gaming buddy. He was family. Adam still had struggles ahead, but he had learned how to face them. Life's just a series of boss fights, right? He joked one night, and I have the best squad to back me up. Looking back, none of us could have imagined that a random online squad would turn into something so meaningful. Adam had changed, and so had we, for the better. As we logged on for another game, Adam's voice rang through the headset. "All right, let's go. Time to carry you guys again." Some things never change, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Story 4. I should have stayed overnight in that mall. It all started as a stupid dare. My friends and I were hanging out late at night, talking about urban legends and abandoned places, when someone brought up the mall, the old, massive structure on the outskirts of town. "I heard it's haunted," Jake said. "Security clears out at midnight, but if you hide, you can spend the night." We laughed it off, but then Kyle smirked. "Bet you won't do it," he challenged. And just like that, my fate was sealed. The plan was simple. Blend in with the late-night shoppers, then sneak into one of the storage rooms before closing time. I wandered to the food court, pretended to browse stores until the lights dimmed, signaling the mall was shutting down. I ducked into an employees-only hallway, heart pounding, and hid behind a stack of boxes. The sound of metal gates rolling down echoed through the corridors. Then silence. I was alone. At first, it was exhilarating. I had the whole place to myself. I ran through the empty corridors, jumping over benches and laughing at my own stupidity. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the faint echoes of my own, but slow, deliberate steps coming from the upper level. My breath hitched. Security? I pressed myself against a pillar, listening. The steps grew louder, then stopped. Thinking I was being paranoid, I decided to explore. I passed by a clothing store, its mannequins posed in eerie silence. But as I walked past, I swear one of them shifted. My stomach dropped. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs. The mannequin was still, but I could have sworn its head was facing the other way before. I shook it off as my imagination playing tricks on me and continued exploring. The mall's emergency lights cast long, ominous shadows. As I reached the electronics store, the lights above me flickered. A faint buzzing sound filled the air. Then out of nowhere, the store's TV screens turned on, all at once. They displayed nothing but static. I took a step back. Then the static shifted into something else, an image, a blurry, shadowy figure, watching me. Panic set in. I needed to find a way out. I ran toward the food court, thinking I could exit through one of the emergency doors. But when I pushed against it, it wouldn't budge. It was locked. I turned back to the main hallway and froze. The tables and chairs that had been scattered moments ago were now neatly arranged, as if someone had just cleaned up. But I was alone, wasn't I? As I tried to steady my breath, a faint whisper tickled my ear. I spun around, heart hammering. There was no one there. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices muttering in an unintelligible language. It came from everywhere and nowhere. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. I sprinted toward the mall's main entrance. But something was wrong. No matter how far I ran, the storefronts remained the same. I passed the same shoe store, the same coffee shop, over and over. The mall had become a looping nightmare. I stopped at a jewelry store, my reflection staring back at me. But then I noticed something. It wasn't just my reflection. A tall, faceless figure stood behind me in the glass. I whipped around, but nothing was there. My reflection, however, still had the figure looming behind it. Realization struck. This wasn't just an abandoned building. Something was keeping me here. Something that didn't want me to leave. My challenge was no longer about lasting the night. It was about surviving it. I wasn't alone. I spotted a security guard in the distance. Relieved, I ran towards him, waving my arms. "Hey, I need help." But as I got closer, I realized something was horribly wrong. His face was featureless, smooth like wax. He He turned his head mechanically, then vanished into thin air. A chilling laughter echoed through the mall. It wasn't friendly. It was deep, distorted, and coming from multiple directions at once. My legs felt heavy, as if something was weighing me down. My instincts screamed at me to run. I sprinted into the nearest store for shelter. But as I looked around, something was off. The shelves were filled with old-fashioned items, dusty cash registers, and mannequins dressed in clothing from the 1950s. The store looked untouched for decades. But the mall had only been abandoned for a few years, hadn't it? As I backed out of the store, I saw something scrawled across the walls in red paint. "You are not supposed to be here." My breath caught. Below it, another message appeared, as if written by an unseen hand. "You can't leave." I ran for the escalators, hoping to find another way out. But as I stepped on, the mall distorted around me. The floor below stretched impossibly far, like an endless void. The escalator sped up, dragging me towards something waiting at the bottom. I jumped off just in time. The food court wasn't empty anymore. Shadowy figures stood near the tables, their heads twitching in unnatural angles. I could hear them whispering, but their lips never moved. One of them turned its head completely backward and looked at me, desperate. I ran through employees-only door, finding myself in an old security office. The monitors flickered with static before displaying footage of myself from behind. Something was standing right behind me. I spun around. Nothing was there. A low, scraping sound echoed through the halls. It was the unmistakable noise of something heavy being dragged across the tile floors. I pressed myself against the security room's door, trying to breathe quietly. Then I saw it. Something moving in a reflection of one of the black and white monitors. A dark figure, hunched and dragging what looked like a heavy sack, moved slowly down the hallway. The sack twitched. Something was inside. I bolted from the security room, turning corners blindly. I spotted an elevator at the far end of the corridor, an old freight elevator that should have been decommissioned. But as I approached, the door slid open with a mechanical groan. A part of me screamed to stay away. But then I heard the dragging noise again. I had no choice. The elevator panel had a button for a basement level that I was certain didn't exist. Without thinking, I pressed it. The doors shuttered shut. The descent was slow, agonizing. As the doors opened, my stomach dropped. The air was stale. The walls were covered in handprints, and not just human ones. A rusted plaque on the wall read, "Westview Mall, open 1956. Closed for reconstruction 1989. That made no sense. The mall had only been open for 2 decades. Had I stumbled into something older? Forgotten? I walked through the basement, stepping carefully over broken tiles. The whispers returned, growing louder. "Help us! Help us!" The voices came from beneath the floor. My foot caught on something, a piece of wood. I bent down and pried it loose. Underneath was a row of hollowed-out spaces, like burial chambers. I remembered the urban legend. People had disappeared in this mall over the years. Some said it was accidents, others blamed criminals. But now I knew the truth. They hadn't disappeared. They had been taken. I turned around and nearly screamed. Shadowy figures stood in the darkness, their hollowed-out eyes staring at me. They weren't attacking. They were just watching and whispering, "You shouldn't be here." A sound erupted behind me. The thing that had been dragging the sack was coming. I sprinted back to the elevator, hammering the button. The doors took forever to close. Just before they shut, I caught a glimpse of a long, clawed hand reaching out from the darkness. I returned to the main level, gasping for air. The digital clock above the food court read 2:03 a.m. But as I blinked, the numbers reversed. 2:02, 2:01. Time was moving backward. I was being pulled deeper into the mall's history. I stumbled into a staff hallway and found employee lockers untouched since the 80s. Photos of smiling workers, name tags, old schedules pinned to the wall. People who had vanished without explanation. Their belongings were still here, as if they had just stepped away for a break and never returned. Desperate for an exit, I ran into a novelty store filled with mirrors. My reflection stared back at me, except in one of the mirrors, I wasn't alone. A dark figure loomed behind me. I turned around. Nothing was there, but when I looked back at the mirror, it was getting closer. Finally, I found an emergency exit. I shoved the door open and ran through, only to find myself back at the mall entrance. I had looped. I wasn't just trapped. The mall was toying with me. I spotted the faceless security guard standing near the fountain. He lifted a hand and pointed at me. "Leave." His voice sounded broken, fragmented. "Before they keep you too." I didn't know if I could trust him. But then the shadowy figures emerged again. Their whispers turned to screams. "Stay." I had to make a choice. Run, or stay and become part of whatever nightmare this was. I followed the faceless man as he led me down a corridor. At the end, a door stood slightly ajar. Light shone through, the first real light I had seen all night. Before I could step through, the shadows whispered one last thing. "If you speak of this, the mall will remember you." A chill ran down my spine. Was this why no one who had escaped ever talked about it? I stumbled out into the parking lot. The sun was rising, but something felt off. The air smelled different. My car was covered in dust, as if it had been sitting there for years. I checked my phone. The date was wrong. I had been inside for a single night, but outside, a whole week had passed. When I went back the next day, the mall was gone. Not abandoned, just gone. An empty field stood where it should have been. No rubble, no remains, as if it had never existed at all. Chapter 36, Forgotten News. Panicked, I searched old newspaper archives. There was no mention of Westview Mall. No grand opening, no construction history. It had been erased, like the people who had vanished inside. Days later, I noticed something in my reflection, a faint handprint on my shoulder. It wouldn't wash off, and at night, I swore I heard whispers in my room, desperate for answers. I found an online forum where others shared similar stories. Some had been inside different malls, different cities, but the experiences were the same. Shifting time, shadow figures, being hunted. One of the forum users sent me a message. Forget it. Stop looking. If you don't, they will come back for you. I deleted my post, burned my notes, but the whisper still came. A year later, I was driving through a new town. I saw a mall under construction. The name on the sign made my stomach drop. Westview Mall, opening soon. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just moving to a new place. Story 5. A Jester's Tale, The Lost Portrait. Cairo, 1924. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues over the crowded streets. Howard Carter, the famed archaeologist known for his discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb, sat in a dimly lit cafe, sipping black coffee. He was supposed to leave Egypt in a few weeks, his work nearly finished, until an old man with piercing green eyes slid into the seat across from him. You seek treasures, do you not? The man whispered, placing a leather-bound journal on the table. Carter frowned. He had seen hundreds of such books, most filled with rumors and nonsense. But this one bore the seal of a royal jester, an entertainer to the pharaohs, a man whose very existence was considered a myth. The man claimed the journal contained a map, leading to something no archaeologist had ever uncovered, a portrait of the last jester of the 18th dynasty, painted in the most sacred chamber of a lost temple. The stranger said, it holds the key to a forgotten pharaoh's secret. Carter had spent years chasing after pharaohs, golden masks, and buried sarcophagi. A jester? A painting? It was hardly a treasure of significance. But there was something in the man's eyes, something that told Carter he wasn't being lied to. The journal was old but well preserved. Carter carefully flipped through its pages, deciphering ancient symbols. One phrase caught his eye. To find the face, follow the laughing moon. It made no sense, but deep in his gut, he knew he had just committed himself to another journey. Carter packed his bags, gathered his team, and set out into the desert. Following the clues from the journal, they ventured toward a forgotten valley that had no place on modern maps. The air was thick with mystery, as if something unseen was watching them. Carter wasn't the only one chasing secrets. At a small trading post, he overheard whispers of another expedition, led by Heinrich Langfeld, a ruthless German archaeologist known for his aggressive methods. Carter knew then that time was against him. After weeks of searching, Carter's team uncovered the entrance to a buried temple. The entrance was flanked by two colossal statues of jesters, their faces eerily grinning in the desert sun. This was it, the place spoken of in myths. Inside the temple, they found a chamber filled with strange markings and riddles. The phrase, only those who laugh may enter, was carved above a sealed door. It wasn't until one of the workers accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism, by laughing, that the stone door groaned open. The deeper they went, the stronger the feeling of unease became. Carter's assistant Ahmed found an inscription on the wall. The jester does not entertain for free. A price must be paid. That night, as they camped outside the temple, Carter was awoken by a sound that sent chills through his spine, laughter. Faint, distant, yet unmistakable. But when he checked, his team was fast asleep. Inside the temple, Langfeld's team had arrived, racing against Carter. They set off a trap, an ancient mechanism that sent spears flying from the walls. Several men fell, and Carter barely managed to pull his team to safety. Following another clue from the journal, Carter found a secret passageway behind one of the statues. Crawling to the dark tunnel, he emerged into a hidden chamber where something astonishing awaited. The chamber walls were painted with images of an unusual figure, the royal jester. Unlike other figures in Egyptian art, this one seemed almost alive, with exaggerated expressions of mischief and sorrow. And at the far end of the chamber stood an enormous portrait covered in dust. As Carter wiped away the dust, he felt something strange. The painted eyes of the jester seemed to follow him. A sense of unease filled the air. This is no ordinary painting, he murmured. Hieroglyphs on the wall revealed a shocking truth. The jester wasn't just an entertainer. He had been the closest advisor to a forgotten pharaoh, erased from history. The painting might be the only proof of his existence. The moment Carter touched the painting, the ground trembled. A gust of wind, impossible in the sealed chamber, roared through. The laughter from before returned, but now it was deafening. Before Carter's eyes, the painting changed. The jester's grin widened unnaturally, his eyes filled with something menacing. And then, the painting was gone, as if it had never existed. Langfeld and his team forced their way in. Laughing at Carter's warnings, they searched greedily for treasures. But when Langfeld touched one of the jester's masks, his body convulsed, then crumbled into dust. The temple began collapsing. Carter and his team ran for their lives, narrowly escaping before the entrance sealed itself shut. The desert swallowed the temple once more. Back in Cairo, Carter tried to shake off the experience, convincing himself it was just another failed excavation. But the moment he stepped into his quarters, a chill ran through him. The air smelled of dust and decay, and then laughter. Low, whispering, but unmistakable. Days passed, and strange occurrences became routine. Objects moved. Candles flickered with no breeze. Then one night, Carter saw it, a shadow in the mirror. Not his own, but a figure with laughing eyes and an unnatural grin. The jester had followed him. News arrived that Langfeld's remaining men had met terrible fates, mysterious illnesses, madness, and disappearances. Before his death, Langfeld had scrawled a desperate letter. The jester will not let us leave. He is still playing his game. Desperate for answers, Carter returned to the journal. The final pages, once blank, now held new writing, his own handwriting, though he had never written it. It spoke of a secret chamber never found. The jester was not yet done. Carter sought out an elderly Egyptian historian, Yusuf, who listened grimly. The jester was not just a fool, Yusuf said. He was a pharaoh's keeper's secrets. If a story was erased, it was for a reason. You must finish what he started. Deciphering more the journal, Carter realized the portrait was more than a painting. It was a doorway. The jester's eyes had pointed to something unseen. The temple still held its last secret, haunted and determined. Carter led a small team back to the site. The temple had been buried again, but as if expecting him, the sand shifted at his feet. The entrance revealed itself once more. Deep inside, Carter followed a previously unseen passageway, leading to a room lined with mirrors. But these weren't ordinary mirrors. They reflected not his image, but his fears, his failures. And in the largest mirror, the jester grinning. The chamber held one last test. The laughter returned, surrounding them. Solve my riddle, or remain as I have. The voice was neither human nor ghostly. It was something ancient, etched into the walls were symbols Carter barely recognized. What is my name? The voice asked. The answer, erased from history, had to be within the temple. They had to find it fast. Carter's assistant, Ahmed, found an inscription partially covered by sand. Clearing it, they read, "The fool who knew the truth." The jester had been more than an entertainer. He had uncovered a secret that led to his erasure. The lost pharaoh had been overthrown in a coup. The jester, his most loyal servant, had hidden the pharaoh's secrets in this very temple. In revenge, the new rulers had erased the pharaoh's name and condemned the jester to exist in laughter, but never be heard. Realizing the answer, Carter spoke aloud. Harsh said he. The moment the name left his lips, the chamber shook. The mirrors shattered. The jester's voice whispered. At last, the laughter stopped. The dust settled. And there, before them, hung the lost portrait. The jester's face was no longer twisted in torment, but calm, peaceful. The curse had lifted. As they left the temple, the walls began to collapse behind them. Carter and his team barely made it out before the entrance sealed once more, as if it had never existed. Back in Cairo, Carter checked the journal once more. The pages that had contained the jester's story were now blank. The jester had been freed, his tale complete. No museum would ever house a portrait. It had faded into nothing. Carter wrote down his findings, but deep down he knew the truth. Some histories refused to be remembered. One night, Carter awoke to a faint sound. Laughter. Not eerie, not haunting. Just laughter. A quiet thank you from the jester, who had been lost to time. Carter never spoke of the lost portrait again. The only proof of its existence remained in the depths of his own mind. Some secrets, he realized, were meant to stay buried. Years later, long after Carter was gone, another archaeologist found something curious in an Egyptian marketplace. A faded painting of a grinning man in a jester's garb. The cycle was about to begin again.